It's simple. If you want to retire before everyone else, then you need to follow these 3 steps.
Sucks. But it does not need to be this way. In fact, you can reach early retirement in as little as 7 years without ever making that much money.
In this video, I want to break down how we can retire as soon as possible, step by step, so that we can have more time to enjoy the things that we want to do in life.
In his video, financial expert Gabe Bolt explains that the fastest way to retire is not to earn more money, but to aggressively increase your savings rate.
And I know that doesn't sound like retirement, but this is going to really be a compounding effect here.
On the other hand, expert Humphrey Yang focuses more on the mathematical side, using numbers. Meanwhile,
that's the simple rule of thumb for most of you guys out there. If you just take your current yearly spend.
Millionaire and influencer Mark Tilbury focuses his advice on optimizing your personal financial system.
Really that straightforward, but most people don't even get past step 1. To be honest.
Interestingly, although Gabe Bolt, Humphrey Yang, and Mark Tilbury teach different paths, they all arrive at the same conclusion. Retiring early doesn't depend on luck, but on strategy. But here's where it gets interesting. Each of them proposes a completely different way to achieve it. One does it with real estate, another with financial mathematics, and another by optimizing 5 key variables. So let's look at exactly how each expert accelerates retirement step by step.
Save money the first year. I've done a bunch of videos on how to save 10K fast, a bunch of different tips for saving money, so I'm not going to go into all those here, but pretty much you want to lower all of your expenses as much as possible.
For Gabe, accelerating retirement starts with something simple: cutting expenses aggressively, especially when the average American has only $87,000 saved, far from the $1 million that many experts say you need to retire.
Ideally, this would be something that you could do from a laptop anywhere, which we'll get into later on in the video. And that's really a slower way to earn money, but in the long run, it can really scale and you'll get to see some compound interest effects of it just kind of shooting off the maps after a couple of years of laying groundwork.
Living far below your income, eliminating major expenses, an expensive car, costly housing, and increasing your savings rate to 50 to 70%. It's not just about earning more money. According to Humphrey Yang, the speed of your retirement depends more on how much you spend than on how much you earn.
We can work backwards and figure out our quickest possible route to get there. So let's actually start by talking about your yearly expenses first. I think this is the biggest factor when it comes to figuring out how we're gonna retire as quickly as possible. And then later on in this video, we're gonna go over 4 must-dos that I think everyone should consider when trying to retire early.
Reducing expenses is only half the game, because the real change happens when all the money you stopped spending begins to turn into massive savings. And this is where the experts agree. The speed of your retirement depends directly on your savings rate.
Step 2. Manage the variables. Just as you need to use the steering wheel, brakes, and accelerator in a car to navigate the roads, you need to use these 5 variables to achieve your retirement goal.
After cutting expenses, Mark Tilbury says it all comes down to one thing: how much money you manage to save and invest every month. Humphrey Yang confirms it with numbers. The most important variable for retiring early is your savings rate. And here's the problem. Although everyone says you should save more, the average American only saves between 3% and 4% of their income, when many experts recommend at least 15% to retire comfortably. That gap explains why millions never reach financial independence. They simply aren't saving enough for their money to grow. And this is where Gabe proposes a practical solution. If your expenses are already under control, the fastest way to increase your savings rate is to generate extra income. And if you think that means getting another exhausting job, not necessarily. Today, many people increase their savings rate with simple side hustles. Online freelancing, selling things they no longer use, or digital job.
20%, it's going to take you much longer to get there, 28.5 years. Now, if we play around with this calculator enough, we can create a table, play around with the savings rates, and then just figure out how many years we need to work in order to retire. As your savings rate increases by 5% throughout the table, we can see that the number of working years will actually decrease disproportionately.
Jobs that only take a few hours a week. But saving money is not enough to retire early. The real change happens when that money starts working for you and growing over time. After saving, the next step is to put the money to work, because saving alone is not enough to retire early. However, more than 50% of Americans do not invest in the stock market, which means their money never takes advantage of compound interest. That's why Mark Tilbury insists on something simple. If you don't invest your money, you'll never be able to retire early, because your money will never start working for you. You don't need to be a Wall Street expert to start investing.
$5,000 and a 70% savings rate can retire in 8 years. As soon as you turn that savings rate down to 50%, which is still a lot of savings by the way, it's going to take you a little bit longer, so 14.3 years instead of the 8 years from earlier.
Yang explains the 4% rule. If your annual expenses are $40,000, you need about $1 million invested to withdraw money every year without running out of funds.
Probably because retirement sounds too old school for them. However, you might not actually want to retire early. I'll explain why towards the end.
The problem is that nearly 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, far from the capital needed to live without working.
So really try to get that up and running, making anywhere from like 1,000 to 3,000 per month, which after 3 to 4 years of having this running should be doable. You can also optimize your housing by running Airbnb out of any of your units. This doesn't work in every location ever, but it works in a lot of locations.
The goal is not an arbitrary number. It's calculating how much you spend per year, multiplying it by 25, and building investments until you reach that number. Reduce expenses, increase your savings rate, invest your money, and create new sources of income. If you apply these 4 steps and reach your retirement number, working stops being an obligation and becomes a choice. But there's something many experts say can accelerate this entire process even more. And interestingly, almost no one is using it correctly. In the next video, we'll look at the strategy some people use to retire in less than 10 years, even starting with normal incomes.